Welcome everybody. Thanks very much for coming. Welcome to Bass Anglers' first ever talk night. With thanks to Daiwa, and there's half a dozen Daiwa guys here. I am pleased to present Braden Schuch talking about bass fishing in the impoundment dams and the Hawkesbury River. We do have half a dozen Daiwa guys here, including Braden, who designs rods, David, who designs the bait junkie lures.
John.
Sorry, my bad. Designs the bait junkie lures, and a few of the other guys. All of them are experts. All of them are available to chat about anything you want around Daiwa's technology and all their rods. Thanks very much. We'll be about an hour. Pizza's at 7.
Yep.
Welcome, Braden.
Let's go. Hello, everyone. My name's Braden Schuch. As Cameron said, I work at Daiwa. I am a part of the product development team. I do mostly rod development. So pretty much, or a lot of these rods that you see here from Daiwa, I've had a hand in some way, shape or form in building. I fish for bass. That's probably my passion, to be honest. I fish for a lot of fish, but bass are probably where it's at for me. I've got a bass boat and everything. I do a lot of the tournament stuff. I moved down to Sydney here 5 or 6 years ago. I fished a lot of bass dams up in Queensland, a lot of Somerset, Wivenhoe and stuff like that. Moving down here, it was a lot different. There's a lot more rivers, a lot more wild bass. It was a really cool change up for me. I really enjoyed targeting them in a different way, especially the Hunter Valley dams. They fish so much different to what Queensland was. So it really advanced my fishing, and I've got a really kind of broad spectrum on how to catch bass from up north to down here and everything in between pretty much. So those are my focuses. I do it, most weekends when I can. I get out and go fishing for bass. But this talk night tonight, I guess I want to go a bit more in depth into like advanced tactics. So talking about seasonality for bass. I know a lot of you guys have probably fished the Hawkesbury. So I think this will be mostly about the dams to help you guys, advance your knowledge on dam fishing. More importantly, the Hunter Valley dams being Glenbourne and St. Clair, because they're the closest. Lostock, this will also apply for Lostock as well, where it's very similar, but mostly those two bigger dams there. So we're going to go into depth about, I guess, the seasons being spring, winter and summer and autumn. A lot of the time you can find bass everywhere in the dam year round, but I guess trying to up your odds on places to look, lures to fish, and so forth to try and get those bigger ones and get more numbers throughout the season. So yeah, thank you for coming tonight. Cameron and the team here have very kindly put this on for us tonight. Your proceeds from the tickets are going to be going towards the Hawkesbury Marine Rescue and also the Westmead Hospital for children, I think it is. So half. So that's the proceeds from your tickets going to go there. You've got a good little goodie bag to help offset that as well. So there's a couple of Daiwa lures in there, spikes, chatterbaits, the new jigs and stuff like that. So I guess starting off here, let's talk about spring. Spring is arguably the best time of year to be catching bass. I think things are warming up, everything's starting to bloom, the animals are starting to move around, and that's no different for the bass. It's my favorite time to go out and target bass. You can start getting the reaction baits back out, you can put the blades down, you can put the small plastics down and stuff like that and start getting at the really cool baits. Your chatterbaits, your spinner baits, your jerk baits, your moving baits, lipless crankbaits and everything like that, top waters. You can go, when you get to a dam, you can expect the bass to be up on the edges. So St. Clair, Glenbourne, whether you're in the pretty much in the main basin areas or starting to move up the dam, they should be pretty much everywhere there. So I would be focusing mostly on 20 foot and up. We're not at the stage of having thermoclines in the dams at that stage yet. It hasn't warmed up enough. So with that water warming up, in winter, typically the dams are at, that 12 or 13 degrees or so roughly. It's getting up to about that 16, 17, 18 degrees through spring, which is when things start moving, the yabbies start coming out. You can throw your top waters a lot better, moving baits, whopper poppers, stuff like that. Fishing shallow for them is really popular at that time of year. Grab your jerk baits out, you can fish extremely shallow. Like if you think that you're fishing shallow, you can go shallower again. I would urge that. You'd be quite surprised about how shallow bass get, and they're willing to bite. A lot of the time they're where the active fish are. You can push off the bank more and you can find the fish in 20 foot, but typically those bigger fish will be up super duper shallow. It's It's not a game of numbers, but it's a game of quality when you get up that shallow. You can catch your numbers out deeper there, throwing your quarter ounce or your 1/6 plastics and either like the bait junkie 2.5-inch plastics and stuff like that. Throw it out, let it hit the bottom, wind it back slowly, give it little taps and stuff like that. But for the bigger fish, I would be targeting up that really, really shallow stuff. Moving down into summer there, I guess things are getting pretty warm. What I've learnt here about the Hunter Dam bass are typically that's when they go out deep. It's getting really, really warm up in that shallow stuff. You will still early morning get fish up shallow. Like it's a unique place. I've last Christmas actually I fished St. Clair. I went out there. I fished eye wavers. This was over the Christmas holidays, and it was a bluebird sky, 11 o'clock in the day, not a cloud. It was just beautiful, no wind, and we'll catch them in 4 foot of water. You could easily see the bottom, and we're casting up further, just in the back of a bay, catching one eye wavers. And they were decent fish, and I haven't done that in summer here because typically you're going to move out deeper. That's where you'll find guys when they say grubbing, they're out there fishing deep trees with, Berkeley gulps. You drop them down and just dead slow roll all the way up, and then they'll just nip and eat it. So that's really popular. You will still get them on top waters through that time as well. It's typically a harder time of year, I find, in the dead of summer. That's where your rivers really start to shine a lot more, I find. Moving into autumn there, it gets a bit, junky, I would say, in autumn, where you can go and throw a chatterbait at an edge, you'll catch a fish, and then you'll fish another 400 meters for nothing. Then you'll pick a jerkbait up and get 1 second cast. Then you fish another 400 meters for nothing, and then that's what I would call junk fishing, where you'd have 10 rods on the deck and you just go, and you're just trying to come across a bass, and you don't know, there's no real pattern about it. You get one on a plastic, you get one on a top water, you get one on this, you get one on that, and it gets really, really frustrating. But that's the type of fishing that it is, kind of thing. You will probably find consistency there in plastics out deeper, but that's kind of typically year round, that type of stuff. Like it's bass are a funny thing with trends here, where you can go out and catch a bass anywhere in a dam at any time of year, but again, it's trying to find those more higher percent areas and stuff like that to get them. So yeah, autumn's a bit junky. I'm not, it's a bit here nor there kind of thing. Then moving into winter. Winter's a bit of a different one as well. Like it can be super tough as well. Typically small plastic baits, little tiny paddle tails and stuff like that. You'll find most of the fish. You can get them on jerk baits as well through there too. But you've got to work for them there as well. It's it's pretty cold, but you'll get them on plastics mostly through there. So I guess looking at it from that point of view, I want to also talk about like tapers of rods there, and how important it is to have a correct taper in a rod. Why we make different tapers at Daiwa, why we've got fast, regular, extra fast, stuff like that, and I guess the benefits to each one of those, because in a scenario, not just for bass fishing, but in those type of scenarios, there's very key reasons to why you would use different types of tapers for different types of lures, different types of retrieves, and I guess different types of approaches in that type of sense there. So for instance, we've got let's have a look at a jerkbait rod here. So this is the 23 Tatula. This is a 6'9" medium light MRB, or medium light regular bait cast. So if you look on the back of all of our Daiwa rods, this one in particular, it is 691 MLRB. So 6'9" being 6'9" in length, the 1 being one piece, so no joints. MLRB, medium light regular B for bait cast. That's pretty much what it is. You can look on the back of every rod, it'll have some type of iteration like that, and that's what it means. So this is a jerkbait rod. Being a regular rod, it's really parabolic all the way through. So there's no real backbone as such with these ones here. So this particular rod is made for jerkbaiting. You can use it for other stuff. You can throw little crankbaits, little lipless baits and stuff like that as well, but predominantly made for jerkbaiting. Your double clutch 75s, You can throw up to your double clutch 95s and some bigger baits as well. I throw up to 110 mil baits on these. Not as such bigger, heavier barra baits, but just bigger bass baits, like American style bass baits. The reasoning why you would go regular on this is because a treble bait, you want to keep the hooks in. Trebles are really well known for just popping out. You've got a heap of points there, but they'll just come out. Where if you throw a jig head, you typically will catch that fish unless they get you around something or chew you off or something like that. So that's the reason for this is the forgiveness. That's what you're looking for in a jerkbait rod, in a crankbait rod, in a trebled rod. I guess you could say in a trebled bait rod is the forgiveness in that. Matching that up with a little 70 size reel there. And this is straight through on this as well. I personally like to use straight through. I aggressively work my jerk baits. I like really get into it. So I find that the stretch in the fluorocarbon helps me, like, it offsets the aggression, I guess you could say, when I jerk a jerkbait. If I use braid, I've really got to think about not giving it as much because it just ends up blowing out or does some overworking in there. So that's my typical jerkbait setup there. Fit for purpose. A lot of the rods that we build at Daiwa are fit for purpose. So this one here in particular is fit for jerkbaiting pretty much. So 6'9", so you can stand up on a boat or from a shore and really get into it a little bit easier as well. So really good rod there for jerkbaiting. We're moving into, I guess, into the spring side of things when the reaction style baits come in. I personally will pick up this one here. So this is unfortunately one of the discontinued models that we're doing, which is, there's still a bit of stock here at the moment. We're just getting out of them now, but this is the TD0. So this one in particular is a 722 ML XB. So 7'2" in length, 2-piece, because this is a butt joint, and medium light, extra fast bait caster. So this one in particular, this would be my overall favorite rod for bass that you can, I just pick it up all the time. I'll use it for pretty much everything. But in particular, I will throw lipless baits on this because I just like the way it feels. I'll throw buzz baits on this. This is my favorite rod for throwing buzz baits, especially down in the river here. I can't beat going down there and throwing a buzz bait at the edge. And just a general purpose all rounder. I'll use top orders for this as well. I'll throw everything from like a smaller 70 mil walk the dog or a popper, all the way up to 100 mil plus on these ones here. And it's just my favorite rod all round there. This one has got a zillion on it. Importantly, I run braid for a lot of my top orders as well. So this one in particular, I pulled out of the boat. This one's set up for throwing buzz baits. So I'll throw braid for all of my buzz baits here. This one is 30 pound of our expedition. I go quite heavy and I go straight through. So I won't have a leader. I won't have anything. I'll just tie directly to the actual lure, whether that's a popper, whether that's a walk the dog, whether that's a whopper plopper or a buzz bait. I just go straight through. Sometimes if I think that they're going to be a bit, weird about it, I might get the marker pen out and mark up a foot or two of my leader. But to be completely honest, when they're in that mood, when they want that lure, because it's spring, because it's coming into summer, there's not much that's going to stop them from getting it. That's what I find anyways. I think, and to be honest, they're the fish that you want to target anyways. You want to burn down a bank. The way that I fish is very run and gun. I don't like really sitting in one area. If there's fish there and it's that time of year, it's tough, then you'll sit on them with a blade or something like that to catch them. But I personally would rather just put the electric on 6 or 7, a good medium to high speed, and just start pumping a bank. And this rod's really good for it. But yeah, that braid I find is, they're the fish you want to come across, those aggressive ones, the ones that want it. And yeah, like I said, it doesn't seem to stop them when they eat it. The other really good benefit that I find with heavier braids is that you can just peg it into a snag. If you do get busted up a bit in the snag and hung up, you can just rip it and it just comes back out because you got really heavy braid there. So I'll also use this rod with 10-pound braid as well. Depending on what type of lures you want to throw, I will throw spinnerbaits on this too, but I would rather a different rod, which we'll get into with that in a minute. Sometimes I'll throw spinnerbaits on braid or straight through, depending on the situation. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorite ones for top water there. We'll go into, where is that one? I don't have a reel on this one because this is Cameron stock, but This one here, this is the Tatula 722 MRB. So again, 7'2", two-piece because it's a butt joint, medium. So this is a little bit heavier than the medium light, regular. So this is similar again to that 6'9", parabolic all the way around. There's no real backbone. If you pick up the ML, you'll notice that the tip, it's really quite tippy, but it will start to lock up through the top section through here more. So it's a lot kind of like if you want a fish to eat it and you don't want them to kind of notice the rod and the weight of a rod there, that's kind of it. Like moving baits, when they hit it, they just take it, you know, they get a mouthful of hooks and off they go. Where this one here, it's a little bit different. I really like the forgiveness of this one here. This one's built for a general or all-round, I guess, approach. So you can throw a TN on this one or a lipless crankbait. You can throw a spinnerbait, a chatterbait. Typically, I would throw a spinnerbait or a chatterbait on this on straight through fluoro. So one thing I do want to get into also tonight is lure retrievals, and I guess how crucial it is to change up your retrieves as well. And to my comment earlier, when I'll either throw braid or straight through for bass on a spinnerbait, that's where I will make the decision if I go braid or straight through with the lure retrieve. Recently in June there, I fished Glenbourne Dam for one of the ABT events, and it was, in my opinion, totally backwards. I went right at the back of the dam. We had a heap of rain. The water was coming in, and there was a lot of positive flow of the water coming in there. And I ended up throwing spinnerbaits up there. It was 11 or 12 degrees of water. It was cold, and the bass were eating spinnerbaits, which isn't, you know, out of the normal. I've also had similar experiences in Lostock in the middle of winter as well, throwing spinnerbaits right at the back of the dam. The key with that bite though was just how slow I was winding it. So you'd throw the spinnerbait out, let it hit the bottom. To be honest, it was in 5 foot of water anyway, so it didn't really matter if it was up or down. And just click it in, give it a bit of a rip, feel the blades go through, and that was where I needed the braid, so you could feel the tick of the blades. And then you'd slow it right back until you could just feel the blades going. When you'd feel the blades stop, you just give it another little jab to get it, you know, going again, and then go slow. And that was the key with catching those bass, because as soon as you'd speed it up, it just wasn't happening. They weren't eating chatterbaits no matter what you did there. It was just for some odd reason, it was a spinnerbait thing, and the retrieve was really critical. I've also had experiences throwing lipless crankbaits where the retrieve is one thing. You throw it tops of trees up in Queensland this one time, throw it out there, just winding a lipless back through, and you wouldn't get a bite. But as soon as you slowed it right down so you could just feel the lipless working, they hated it. They just kill it. And it was just the difference between those two retrieves which made you know, catch fish and not catch fish. So I'd urge tonight, one of the key points to take away here is the lure retrieve. Don't just get stuck in a rhythm, go and throw, and just keep on working down. If something's not working, typically, if you're not catching bass, typically there's a reason why that is. So one of the easiest ways to do it, unfortunately, for me personally, it's one of those nuisances where I have to remember to do it. So I'll typically use different types of retrieve rates in a reel, because it's super hard for me to want to go really, really slow. So I'll just go down to a 6.3 or something like that, because I have to think about every wind, I'll just get stuck into a routine of just winding the same speed. So I like to utilize, you know, 6.3, 7.3, 8.1s for that purpose pretty much. So, but back on the rods here. So yeah, this one here, really, really good all-rounder, regular, good for crankbaits, those medium-sized crankbaits when you get up to, you know, your blitzers and stuff like that. And just a good all-round rod there, but a regular as such there. So going into a bit of spin stuff. So this is typically more of a winter style, winter to spring, or I guess end of autumn, winter, early spring, where you want to be throwing a plastic or a blade or something like that. I'll throw both on this one here. This one's the Commander, but typically I'm a bit of a taller guy, so I'm not too worried with a bit of length. This is 7'4" light, or 742 LXS. So the X in this stands for extra fast. So that's where it locks up a lot quicker there. Similar to that MLXB that we talked about before, it locks up for plastic fishing in particular. You want to throw, I personally like throwing a 1/6 with our 2.5-inch minnow on them. I chop them back slightly, throw it to the weed. You know, the boat might be in 20, 25 foot of water. Typically, you'll see a lot of those bass. The trap that a lot of people get caught up in in the Hunter Valley dams are that you'll work down a bank, a heap of fish will come up on the bottom, and they'll just be following your boat, and you think, oh shit, that bank is just full of fish, and you do a Yui, and then you don't see another fish because they're kind of pests like that. Like a little squirrel will come up, and they will just sit in your beam in the shadow of your boat and just go all the way down. And you think this thing is just loaded, and you're just going to brain it, and then you don't catch a fish. So I've been caught in that trap many times, but yeah, really good plastic rod. I throw this typically 1/6 is my go-to. A lot of guys will throw a quarter as well. Chop the bait junkie down a little bit because the smelt in the dam, that 1.5 to 3 inches or so. Small profile, throw it out there. But particularly the extra fast, I like it because I can give it just little shakes. I call it the shake and bake. You just throw it out there, let it hit the bottom, give it a little wind, and then just give it like a tense up your arm and give it a little shake. And that'll just impart a little bit of action there. And that's where I find that extra fast is really, really key for that. Because when you go back to a fast or a regular, it just gets too sloppy. Your rod just jolts around a lot, and it kind of gets really fatiguing on you. And you'll notice it after an hour of fishing like that. Your forearm will be sore, and it gets pretty tough. So go-to plastic rod. This is also a really good rod for blades when you're hopping blades underneath the boat, because it's got the really fast reaction of an extra fast. You want to be able to just jolt it up and down, and it doesn't just bounce around everywhere like a regular rod would. So there's a few models in the range that are LXS, but that one there is particularly my favorite. So yeah, looking into I guess also the retrieves there, I want to talk about rod angles too. This is a really key one, especially like I said earlier, when you're fishing super duper shallow for bass. If you want to throw a lure out and then you're just winding it back or jerking it down, it might not be doing what you want to do, especially with like a lipless crankbait here. That's a really key one here. If you're throwing it at a bank and then you just wind it back normally, you'll end up hitting the dirt, and that's typically not what they like. So rod angles are a really key part here as well to manipulate the lure into doing what you want it to do. So you want to throw it out there, having a rod tip up, that obviously brings it up closer to the surface, and then playing with your reel speed to keep it where you want it to be there. That's really, really key, because then if things are too tough and your lure's not doing what you want it to do, you'll move. But if that's where the fish are, you just want to make those little changes, those 1% changes, which end up catching, that fish that you want to catch. And typically, if the bigger fish are up shallow, I run off a rule when I'm bass fishing. If you catch, pretty much anything over 40, I'd say 40 centimeters, but anything above 40, 45 centimeters, if you've caught that fish is there for a reason. You can go and catch, a 30 centimeter bass, and they'll typically be everywhere. Where if you just catch a random big one, they're smart enough, they've been around long enough they're there for a reason. So if you continue to do what you've done on that cast, whether it's the shallow side of things, whether it's the lure retrieve, whether it's, that one key thing, keep doing that, and typically you'll catch more of them. That's what I found. And to the shallow side of things, that's where I guess some of the biggest learning curves for me, coming from Queensland, fishing those bigger dams full of bony brim. You're throwing, Helco twisties, of all things, 20-gram Helco twisties out in the middle of a dam in 20, 30 foot, and you're just rolling it back. You're throwing a chatterbait in summer because they really, really like that, that thump, that vibration and everything like that. You wouldn't really fish edges. You wouldn't fish, the boat was rarely in 6 foot of water, 7 foot of water throwing at a bank. Down here, that is probably the biggest thing that I've found is, being shallow. If you think, if there's enough water up there for their backs to be in, the chances are that they're up there, even if it is quite clear. So you just need to be, more stealthy with your approaches and stuff like that. So it's, it's pretty cool, especially when you start keying in on stuff like that. Like one of my favorite techniques out at Glenbourne and St. Clair is throwing eye wavers. They're like a little jerkbait style thing, and they just kind of just go under the surface, and they eat them really, really well. And that has taught me a lot for where bass are situated. I guess it's pretty cool. So, but yeah, looking at the times of year there, I think there's some good stuff to kind of take away from that when you're getting into the warmer months like this as well. The yabbies are starting to move around a lot, and skirted jigs are a really, really good option as well. it's been around for a few years now, but a lot of guys are throwing it. It's turned to be into a staple of what's on a bass deck now for tournaments and stuff like that. So that's a really good option. That if they're not up shallow, if they're not eating moving baits, that slow it down quite substantially. Throw a skirted jig around. Whether it's a little, you can get either football jigs or like swim style jigs, and this is more of a hybrid between the two. It's got a little bit wider head. It also swims as well, but typically you want to throw it out, let it hit the bottom, and just so really, really slow hops back. And if they're not on that reaction bait, that's a really, really good way to try and get them to bite and make it happen there. So, is there any questions on anything that I've gone through there at all? Anything that you guys want to go through? Must have done good. No question. Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, bass are there. We just need to work them out and how they're gonna get to where they are and how you're gonna catch them, I guess. So, one. Oh, go on. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So typically, the way that I know of bass working, um, if we're going to talk about a river situation here, because that's a wild bass that they're going to do what they're going to do. Dams are a bit harder because they're obviously locked in there. They've still got that instinct though. So talking about a river, they're going to typically in summer they're going to move up, into the really shallower gorgia up the back of creeks and stuff like that. Winter they're going to move downstream. They're going to breed. They're going to do their stuff in the brackish, and spring and autumn it's kind of in between there. With dams, it's a bit harder because you could go out on any given day of the year and catch, in Glenbourne, you can go out and catch one on a dam wall pretty much every day of the year. Doesn't really matter if it's summer, doesn't really matter if it's winter. You could do that with nearly any bank. It's trying to find, I guess, the higher percentage areas and taking the seasons into account, the heat, the temperature and all of that into account. That's how you're going to do that. So, with the spring, they're going to be moving. They're going to be up on the edges a lot more. In the winter, they're going to be a bit more lethargic. They're going to be down deeper. They want the smaller baits, stuff like that. So, in that particular reason, there, while I went up the back for Glenbourne, there's a few reasons. In the tournament situation, everywhere gets boat pressure. That's the really tough part. Bass struggle with boat pressure. You can go out to Glenbourne the week before and just brain them, and then a tournament comes and it's just super duper tough. And with the knowledge of knowing the amount of water that had come into the dam and all the rain that we've had, I made the decision to just to go up the back and see what was up there. And then I got to a point where I was nearly going to turn around because I didn't get a bite. And then I saw a little bit of positive flow on a twig that was going in the water. So that made me just keep on going up, because to me, when you talk about positive flow, snags and stuff like that, that's a high percentage area. So if something goes past a bass, they're probably going to eat it because it's going to be gone because it's stuck in a current. So that's the reason why I went right up there, which it goes against a lot of stuff that I thought. I just had a hunch for a spinnerbait at that time of year. And when I saw the water temperature, I don't know why I had a hunch on that, but yeah, exactly. And again, it goes against a lot of stuff that I would typically do, but it worked. And I remembered back to that time at Lostock when I caught them like that as well. And that is the real struggles about dam fishing, because they're just, they can be doing anything, but it's keying into, what the higher percentage areas of catching them are, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, that was a bit of an odd one, but it seemed to work out well, which was good. So, another rod I want to talk about here, and another technique, it's not super popular down here, but I have done it, is deep crankbaiting. So this one in particular, this is a 7'6" medium heavy regular. So this one's built for throwing big crankbaits. So Cameron's got on the back of the wall there a couple of things called an IK 800. They're a big, deep crankbait that get down to 20, 25 foot on the cast. And it's really popular up in Queensland. I've done it a bit down here now, where in summer in particular, bass will go and sit on on riverbed ledges. So when you, not so much in the bottom end of the dam because it's quite deep all the way through, but when you get up into that midsection to higher sections of the dam, it doesn't matter if you're down here in Victoria or you're up in Queensland. Some dams are more defined with riverbeds, some aren't. But typically when you get up to the back of the dams, you'll see there's a few giveaways that, there'll be a heap of timber and there'll just be a little snake going up. That's typically the riverbed. But when you go up and you can sound up on top of those, some of them are, 15, 20 foot, and then it drops down into the riverbed. In summer, typically the bass will go and sit on those riverbeds. If you put your boat in summer, you've probably seen it before down here, you turn your sounder on and there'll just be a very distinct line going through your sounder at between 5 to 25 to 30 foot. That's a thermocline. That's a different temperature of water there. If you see one of those, I would typically go and fish that same depth for bass because they like to be in that thermocline. It's a comfortable, temperature, comfortable depth for them. So if you see that in summer, that's a really, really good starting point to just go and, again, you've got to work out the sections because dams are weird like that. You've got to work the sections of dam where they're in, whether they're at the top section, the midsection, or the bottom section. But if you, yep, 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 yeah. So with the thermocline, sometimes they're in the bottom section of the dam. The further up the dam you go, they'll disappear. So if that's the case, I would go and find either rocky bluffs and then target that thermocline section, that 20, that 30 foot, because that's typically, you'll see if you're sounding out deeper, you'll see that there'll be lines through the thermocline, either around that section, a couple of foot either side of it. Typically, I would go straight away and target the depth that thermocline is in. In summer particularly, they love to go offshore and sit into the tops of trees and stuff. St. Clair's a really, really good, case for that. You can go out to St. Clair and you can see them in the tops of trees. Whether you've got live, whether you've just got side scan, or whether you go over with your normal 2D, you'll see them in the tops of trees. If there's a thermocline in those trees as well, that's like game on, because you will, the trollers don't do it for no reason when you think about it. They've done it for how many years? They've gone through and trolled a lure at 10, 15 foot, and they seem to catch all the time. So there's reasons for things and why it works and why it's been around for so long. I guess we're just doing it differently with different lures now. But St. Clair in particular, that 15, 20 foot thermocline around those trees, for some reason, they love to go offshore in summer and just sit suspended on things. And that's where the trees, it gives cover, it gives bait, it gives everything that they need, and they'll go and do that. So, but there's a lot of ways to target bass, and dams are definitely the more interesting side of things. That's the frustrating side of things as well. But in the way of rivers, again, a lot of you guys fish rivers, so I'm not telling you guys anything new here, but typically they'll go up in the backs of creeks and stuff in rivers. They love moving baits. Like this time of year, we're starting to get top water coming on. When those cicadas start, that's really, really game on there. There's a lot of lures to cater for that. Top water being the most explosive, the best to look at. It's just finding those right sections of the rivers, because from what I've found, you put in here, you won't catch much. Then you move up. I normally go up a couple of bends, try and catch one or two, see how it goes, and then go up a couple of bends, and you slowly come into more fish. So that's what I've kind of turned into run and gun, because if you're not catching anything, there's probably a reason why that is, especially in the rivers, whether there's too much salt, whether there's not enough salt, whether it's too hot. A lot I've found in the Hawkesbury a lot as well, because I fish the tidal side of things a lot, that there'll typically be a dirtier patch of river that kind of just goes in and out with the tide. And it changes, obviously from the tide, but it'll slowly work its way out as well. So, whether they like that dirt, sometimes they do like being in that dirty water. Sometimes they like the really clear stuff as well. So that's the toughest part about it, is finding the section, because unlike like largemouth in particular, they're really keyed into what they're doing at that time of year, technique specific. That's what they're doing. If that's that temperature, that's that time of year, that's what they're doing. Our bass, we don't have that luxury with our bass. So we know to a point what they're going to be doing, but then you've got to work the rest out, if you know what I mean. So any questions at all? Anything at all? Anything on product development? Anything on bass? Anything? Yep. Yep. Yeah, they will definitely do that. I found more so in at that time of year when there is a thermocline, it will be summer. They will be active. They like whether it's the shine of the blade of a chatterbait or a spinnerbait, whether it's the noise of that or whether it's just the whole moving aspect of it. So I would keep it above their head, and they should come up and look at it. If you've got some type of live sonar, you can work out pretty quickly if they get scared of a lure, if they want to eat a lure, if they follow it. You know, you can kind of work out what's going to be best there. They're not going to do the spinnerbait there, throw a plastic or something like that. So, yeah, 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 yeah. They will do as well. Like you can throw a jig as well and crawl along the bottom and be like a yabby. The That's the difference between a dam fish, I guess, and a river fish. The river fish are obviously a lot more opportunistic. They'll if you pull something past them, they're either going to eat it or they're not going to eat it. But the opportunistic side of it is the fact that they probably will eat it. Where a dam fish is just a different kettle of fish where they've seen a lot of stuff. They've seen a lot of bait and everything like that. It's trying to find more so that right lure or that, like I said, that right retrieve as such as well. Retrieve speed is such a big deal. Whether that's using a lipless crankbait, like I said, a spinnerbait super duper slow, or a plastic. You know what I mean? You throw a plastic out there. Sometimes they like a burn and kill. Sometimes they like it just really slow roll. Other times, you know, to your point there, they'll eat. You know, you'll work a half ounce plastic roll. This is up in Queensland. You roll it. You do 6 really slow winds and let it hit the bottom again. 6 really slow winds, let it hit the bottom again. But they won't eat it just slow rolled back. They want it for some reason this much off the bottom and it won't change. You've just got to work that one key thing out and then you go from there with it. So yeah, and whether that's a spinnerbait or a chatterbait in Queensland in summer, you go and throw a chatterbait out deep, and I don't know what it is. Again, if it's the movement, the flash, the noise, whatever, but they just love it. So yeah, yep, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the really mental side of things, and like I said, I struggle with that a lot as well because for instance, the Clarence River, it's my favourite place to fish for bass, the Clarence. And I'll go and throw a beetle spin at a grass edge, and I'm guilty of that every day of the week if I go and do that. I'll go and throw quarter ounce or 3/8 beetle spin, and because I know that that's what they eat. I know they should eat it. Why aren't they eating it? I'll just move. But then there's a point where you've just got to say, no, I'm going to change up. And I personally, I typically find that point when it's too late, which is the problem. I've been guilty of that in the past, but that's a good one. I think that's kind of up to the angler. You know, like if you think you've given it a good crack, if you think that you've tried that in a few different areas and it's not going to happen, try something else. So oh, me, John B's on. We're on. You want to pause that? Yeah. Like I said earlier, this rod here, and I know it's being discontinued, which is very upsetting, but 722 MLXB, I didn't even need, what did you say, 2 rods? I didn't even need 2, I'll just take that one. I don't know what it is, this one here, if you're throwing, I don't know, yeah, it's just a perfectly suited for our bass. I've fished a lot of different rods over the years, and for some reason, this one is just it. You can throw a top water. You know, I'm thankful I'm quite tall. I can throw a jerkbait on it. But typically, I'll throw top waters, reaction. You can fish jigs to a point on this as well, but I find it slightly too light. But as a general all-rounder, if I had to pick one rod, it would be that one right there. So lures are a bit different. Probably, to be honest, I would pick, because they catch them anywhere, I'd pick a 2.5-inch minnow in any make or model. Doesn't really matter, just a small minnow profile, paddle tail. They'll eat it. Blade. I don't really like saying that, but it's a blade, like they just catch. I don't know what it is, whether it's just rolled back, whether it's hopped back, whether it's just on the bottom, annoying them. A blade every day of the week will do it, you know. A blade is such a versatile lure that you can, I typically will use a quarter ounce one. You can throw it out and then I'd do a retrieve like that kind of thing, and that one really gets the arm burning. But it's kind of like a tense shake, and it just makes it enhances the action of the blade that'll be shimming along, but then it'll like jitter around as well. And just throw that at a bank, whether that's in a river or at a dam, and just give it all the way back to the boat. It after if you're a bit out of practice, it burns after a while, but yeah, but then with that exact same lure, you can drop it straight down and just do short, sharp hops. And on a school or on a snag, like tips of snags and stuff like that, if you're working past and it's a really good lay down, you don't catch anything on a reaction bait, drop a blade down on the end of it or in the middle of it and just jab it. Jab the slack. Really, really, you don't even have to feel it go, just jab the slack. You'll know if it fouls up because it won't have that same feeling, that same resistance when you jab it, but just jab it and they'll eat that really, really well. When I fish blades, I'll typically take all the trebles off them because that's what I find. No matter what make or model blade you use, most of them foul up with their stock trebles on, especially when you're jabbing at it like that because it's such an erratic action. It just turns on itself and hooks the line. So to counteract that, I take all of the trebles off. I get assist hooks, so just like braided assist hooks, and I put those just on the back, and then that really stops the fouling up from happening. And you don't really lose any fish either there. I find it's probably better because it's just two single small mosquito hooks that are just pinned somewhere in them, so that typically helps a lot there as well. Third lure, I'd go a buzzbait. Love a buzzbait. I don't know why. 3/8. I make my own buzzbaits. Just a 3/8 buzzbait, quite a large profile, especially in the Hawkesbury here. Like coming into the warmer months, they hate the noise. The noisier the better. I'll bend them down, get the buzz hitting the actual wire, so it makes a really clacky sound. When you go to spin the blade, it won't spin because it'll hit. When it's out of the water, it'll actually hit the metal. But when it's in the water with the resistance of the water hitting it, it'll just make a heap of noise. And I don't know what it is, but they just eat that in there really, really well. And I've also had a lot of luck on buzzbaits in dams as well, especially when the water rises. That's a really, really good time of year, or time I should say, to catch a bass. Whether that's in the dead of winter or in the heat of summer, if we get a heap of rain and Glenbourne, it's probably not a good time now because Glenbourne's been up and down so much. Same with St Clair, but if we had a bit of a dry spell where there's not much rain and then we get a big influx and the water goes up a foot, 2 foot, all of that flooded grass, they'll be up super duper shallow in that. And you can throw, a jig, a beetle spin, a buzzbait, anything you really want, a plastic, jerkbait up in there, and they'll just be super shallow. That bite only lasts a particular amount of time though because obviously all of that vegetation has been flooded, so it's going to start rotting and going a bit yuck after a while. I typically will find that will be 2 or 3 weeks before it starts to go a bit rancid, but in that time when it goes up can be some of the best fishing you'll have in a dam, and it's just good fish up shallow, eating worms, eating bugs, eating anything they can find up there, and just getting fat because they just go and gorge up in there. It's a really good time of year that if any type of rain comes, have a day off work and, and get up there and have a look. Yep. Yeah. Good question. So these ones here aren't a very good depiction. I mean, this one is because I always have fluoro on it, but typically it's kind of down to user preference. I've swayed from braid and fluoro over the last 6 or 7 years quite heavily. I will pretty much throw straight through on nearly everything now, except for, like I said earlier, when I want to dead slow roll things. Fluoro is quite tough to feel at distance. Even when I'm throwing, I'll typically on this reel here, I'll have straight through 10 or 12 pound on this one here. This is a Steez HLC, which is a hyper long cast. And I like fluoro on this one because I find it's got a little bit more weight. And because I'm throwing a big deep diving crankbait, the further I can get it away from me, the deeper I can get it down. So with that bit of extra weight, it spins the spool further, so I can just hoik this thing like forever. And yeah, correct. Because it's heavier than braid, I find it rotates the spool quicker. And when you tune like that reel in particular in, like it just sends these things out there. When you get a bird's nest, that's a different that's a different problem because it doesn't come out. You've got to cut it out. But typically, I'll use it for technique specific stuff. Top waters, like I said earlier, top waters for me now, regardless if I'm throwing, a kicker curly on a small spin reel. I'll usually use a 3000 spin with 15 pounds straight through J-braid Grand, because I find Grand's got a lot more strength in that side of things, and it's a lot more abrasion resistant. So I'll throw 15-pound J-braid Grand straight through to a 2.0 EWG and put a kicker curly on or a kicker walker on, because the pure thing there is I'm direct to it. I don't have a failure point of being a knot there at all. I can just tie it on straight away, skip it as deep as I want in there, because even if I get a snag, I just rip it out, and it's not a real big problem because you're not using 10 pound with 10-pound leader or something like that, where you're really straining stuff. I find in that situation as well, leaders will get scuffed quite heavily. So you're not really getting to that point as well. You have to retie a couple of times each session, or during the session, I should say, with braid, because it will fur up a bit. But in that particular reason, I'll use straight through braid. Crankbaits, anything treble, I'm more so leaning towards now using straight through. I just find the retention of keeping a hook in is a lot better. There's obvious, very clear trade-offs with straight through fluoro over braid. You do lose feel. It is a lot more stretchy, and you've got to get used to that, because going from braid to fluoro, you notice it. Something fierce, like it's really stretchy and feels really spongy, and it feels a bit weird. But when you get over that, I personally find a lot of benefits in straight through. So, any more questions at all? Yeah. Yeah. This time of year. Spring's beautiful time of year. When things start heating up, like I know Brett there, for instance, he goes off the 16-degree rule. That's when the yabbies come out. I find pretty much any time in spring, if you go and throw a jig, you'll get a pretty quick idea if they're going to eat a jig or not there. Yeah, that's typically what I'll do. That bite will go all the way through spring, through into summer, and a little bit into autumn, where it starts to cool off a bit. But like I said earlier, that autumn's a bit of a pest time of year, where you can go and throw anything, and it's a bit tough to kind of catch them consistently. If you want to create a pattern or get consistency, it's a bit harder in a dam in autumn. So, but you can still catch them. So, yeah. Any further questions? Yep. Yep. Earlier is, first light. I find you always have the best success. Whether you're throwing top water, whether you're throwing anything at a bank or something like that, the shallower, the earlier, the better. But saying that, like in the rivers here, you can go and throw a frog all day if you want to. You just find those shady patches, you skip under them, and they'll be up in there. For that particular scenario, throwing a frog, you will obviously catch them, first thing in the morning. But sometimes using the light to your advantage in that situation, where there is a very clear cut off, a shadow line, that can be the bite trigger there. That they're in the shadow is only a meter, because that's where the overhang is. When it comes out of there, that's the trigger that they'll come and bite that. So a lot of the time, if you work down the same bank at first light, you might not catch many, but then you go back over it, and that just the fact that it's coming out of there at that time of day with a hard, shadow line can be the difference between catching more fish and not, a lot of the time. So, I still go out first thing, because I want to be out there first light. I want to do all this type of stuff and do that. So I'll still do that regardless. But yeah, a lot of the time using the light to your advantage in that situation. I'll typically go deeper as the sun comes up. I'll typically go deeper, but over the years I've learned that, especially St. Clair, going shallower. Again, like I said earlier, shallower. You think because the sun's up, they're not going to be just there in 2 foot of water, but I think because of that mindset, a lot of people just go out deeper, but they're still up in there. It's hard slog. You've got to work for them up there. You might catch 2 fish an hour, but they're the big fish that you want to catch. They're the trophy fish, where you can go out and catch, your 30 centimeter ones, get, half a dozen 30 centimeter ones on plastics or blades or something like that, 100%. But if you want to go and catch those bigger ones, that's kind of where they're at. Same with Glenbourne as well. Upper end big laydowns and stuff like that. I don't think it really matters too much time of day. I used to consider I used to consider time of day a lot, but it's probably not one of my major considerations anymore. So barometer, the old saying, 10-20 bass are plenty. I don't really mind personally. I mean, there's probably some type of theory in that somewhere, but I'm more on the stance of if you got time to go fishing, go fishing. Like I'm not going to not go fishing on Saturday because the barometer's crappy or it's raining or it's windy. Like I go fishing because I kind of just want to go fishing. And my kind of thought with that has always been, if you don't go fishing, you're not going to catch a fish. Where if you go and catch, it might not be great fishing. You might go catch 2 fish, but that's still better than sitting on the couch and doing nothing. So yeah, so I don't really follow barometers or moons too much. I do, over the time I have learnt that moons are are a decent thing to probably look into, but I haven't done it enough to talk with confidence on it. Like the stuff I do know with that is that, when they're big, when the moon's big in the sky, they're kind of feeding at night more, and it seems to be typically harder during the day in those situations. My biggest kind of thing that I would track, especially in the rivers, are tides, obviously. That certain sections of the river work better with certain tides, and kind of tracking that a lot more is what I would look into over anything like a barometer or something like that. So, yes. Yep. 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 Yeah, yes and no. I think I work off of pretty much 2 options, either a dark or a light option. Using, what's here now, kicker curlies, obviously a black one. It's, if I look at a top water, whether that's a frog, whether that's a buzzbait, whether that's a popper, whatever, any type of top water, I normally look at the bottom of it, because that could be a black top, but if it's a white bottom, I would say that's a white lure that is mostly being seen in there. So I typically would just work off either a light or a dark, and I'll look at the bottom of it. Time of day, I haven't found anything that really stands out. I've had really good success on black ones. I've also had really good success on white ones at any time of day, at anything. So I wouldn't be too concerned, or I'm not personally too concerned with the color in that aspect. I'm more concerned about what color the belly is. Pretty much is the only thing I look into there, because you can buy really, really cool, nice looking lures, like top waters that have got really nice purple and scale patterns and stuff on the top. But then, I mean, ultimately, when you're working it back, they might get a flash of that or something like that, and that could be the difference between catching fish or not. But ultimately, I'll look at what's underneath it as the main option there. So, anything else? Yes.
When you're throwing your chatters and your
Yep.
debates and whatnot,
Yep.
they
Trailer on it.
or
Yep. Yeah. So typically with spinnerbaits, I'll leave spinnerbaits bare. My thought is that there's obviously a lot going on with them already. They've got 2 blades that are flicking around, and I don't really want to add too much more to that. It's not to say you won't catch it on there. I normally look at a trailer on a jig, on a chatterbait, as a way to bulk out the spur, as a way to bulk the skirt out more so than the action. A lot of the times I'll throw like a flick. We do a bigger flick now, a 395. That's just it's just a jerk shad. It doesn't have any real action on it. It will have a little S when on a chatterbait, but I'm using that more so to bulk the skirt out, get a bigger profile over the action. So with a spinnerbait, I won't really do that. I'll put a stinger on it, a single stinger hook. I'll either use a little bead or something to keep that stinger hook on, or I've got in the boat, I've just got a bit of milk carton that I just chop a little circle of, and I just push that over it. So that's all I'd really do with a spinnerbait. With a chatterbait, on the other hand, typically I'll put a trailer on that, again, only to bulk out the profile. I'll normally go like a 3.2 inch minnow or something of that sort, something that's short, stout, but it's got a little bit of width about it, because then I just like having a bit of extra flair on the skirt there, because when you're working it back, that skirt shimmies a lot more. You can get a little bit of action out of it, but again, I'll either go like a flick or just like a really subtle paddle tail on that, more so for that bulkiness than anything. Yeah, you can use grubs. I know a lot of guys will use just grub shaped stuff, and you're going to get more of like a twinkling action, I guess you could say, out of the back of that. That will definitely work as well. But again, like it's kind of down to the user, because if you're looking at it like you add something to it, it can get to be quite a decent sized bait. And our bass are more of a swiper, if you know what I mean. Like sometimes they're in the mood and they'll just eat it. But that's why you'll get a lot of short strikes on stuff, and that's why I go ahead and put trailing hooks on them. I'll still put a minnow on this and still put a trailing hook over the top of that. The downside with that is that the minnow tail will come up and get snagged up on that trailing hook sometimes. But to me, I'd rather every 10 casts pop the tail of the minnow off it than lose 4 bites that session. I'll pretty much always do a trailer on it. No, so football jigs are different in that aspect. I take the exact same approach. You can get a lot of different trailers these days that work, crawl style trailers that will work on the drop and stuff like that. I tend to personally lean away from them because, again, our bass, I think, are they're really quite skittish. They look around it, and then anything that's weird, they might get a bit scared and go away. So I lean on something that pretty much has no action. Again, I go off the bulky side of things. I want to have something that is poking up that looks like some claws, that doesn't really have a heap of action. That's not to say that the action ones don't work, but to me, that's quite aggressive. That's more of a swimming action, and it's kind of not what I'm going for when I want to imitate a yabby. So I'll put something on here again just to bulk it out a bit more. So
You'll try that
as is, no trailing hook on this one. Yeah. Yep. No, always with. I'm always with for these. Yeah, a yabby, correct. Yeah. So these are made to come through pretty heavy structure, whether that's timber, whether that's rock, weed to a point as well. So you'll know when you have a bass. A jig bite's pretty cool because you'll throw it out. When I work a jig, I'll just slow drag it, and if it gets hung up a bit, give it a little pop, but not like, you don't want to move it, more than a foot pretty much. If you're moving it more than a foot, I think that's a bit too much. So typically dragging rock walls are really, really good for that. You just slowly drag it, and then you only have to move it, the rod tip, a little bit, because when you think about a rock wall, if you move your rod tip a heap, it's got to come down 5 foot. Where if you move it a little bit, it's only got to go down a foot, down a foot, down a foot. So you're going for that yabby imitation where they'll see it, they'll bite it. And a lot of the times when the jig bite's on, if you're not paying attention, you'll see your line out here somewhere because he's just eating it, swim off with it down here, and you've got to catch up to him and get into him. But it's kind of, I'd put it down to like a bait fish, like when you're fishing bait bite. It'll just be a very distinct, if you're in contact with it, it'll be a very distinct dunk. And then you'll feel them fiddling around with it and going like doodle, doodle, doodle. And then you kind of just give it a bit of time. If you feel that initial bite, don't just rip it. Let them eat it. Sometimes some might just give it one dunk and go away, but let them eat it a little bit, give them a bit of time, and then wind down and strike into them. The weed guard, I know for a lot of people, is a bit of a tough one to get kind of around because in some aspects you can consider it that it's going to be a problem to get the hook through. But when they've got it in there, if you get a bite, you'll notice that a lot of the time, a lot of the hook rash or a lot of the bite marks, are on the head. So they've got the whole thing in there. There's no issues with getting in there. Before, these smaller style finessier jigs that are a lot more suited to our bass come on the market, I was throwing stuff from America that was like 4-0s, like quite decent sized hooks, and they still got them in there pretty decently. So it's more so to bulk skirts out for that trailer, but always with jigs, I'd run a trailer on it. So, anything else? Any questions on R&D or anything like that at Daiwa? Rods, reels, line, lures? Yep. The reels. Yep. Yeah. So with new products for Daiwa, the really unique thing with us is that we own a lot of our factories. So rod factories, reel factories, we own those. So at a stretch, I guess you could say the people working over in we've got stuff in Japan, China, Vietnam, Taiwan, Scotland even. They're like our co-workers pretty much, but overseas there. So we're really fortunate enough to own these factories. So that's where we have really close relationships. Particularly in Australia here, we design everything. So if I was to build a new rod, I would do all the cosmetics on it. I would choose what I want to do with reel seats. I would, if I want to make it pink, I can make it pink. I can change the binding threads. I can do all of that stuff myself. I can work out what tapers I want, what line ratings I want it to be. It's all within relevance, obviously, with the capabilities of the blanks and everything like that. I can choose technologies that go into it. That's a really big point to make a rod. You see everything from a $99 rod up to a $700 rod. And a lot of the time with that, it comes down to guide selections because the different inserts, cost a lot more money. The technologies and graphites and everything. So we do all of that. We can choose all of that. We go to the factories and organize all of that stuff. Similar process for reels as well. So we do a lot of that as well, which is really cool. It's cool to go and check out how they do it, have a lot of input. That's the really unique thing with rods here. These aren't just, a lot of these rods aren't just rods that we've just got from that American one will probably do the job here for a barrow. We'll just get that in here, or that European one that's for a pike will do for a cod or something like that. A lot of these rods are purpose built for, Australian species. So these Tatula rod ranges are built around, for example, around the natives, bass, cod, barra. So like I said, that rod there at the start, that's a jerkbait specific rod for a bass. We've got jerkbait specific rods for barra. We've got cod swimbait rods. They're all built for purpose. So that's a really unique, cool thing that we can do. And that's why, like John, for instance, that's done a lot of these bait junkies here, like the gars and stuff like that. They're all 3D designed. John does all the renderings himself. He can come up, and this is where, with John coming on board in the last couple of years, this has streamlined like a lot of the processes for us now, where we'd have a concept and we'd go back to somebody that could do a 3D design. But with John being able to do it in-house now, he can print them in a hard 3D. He can send 3D files off to the factory. We can tweak it, and we've just fast-tracked getting this lure to market and getting a better changes, better updates on it, and understanding it better with stuff like that. So that's a really cool aspect of it, that there's a lot of freedom to make to make that type of stuff and to make those changes as well. So cool. Depends. So typically with like rod developments, it can take anywhere from 10 to 16 months, depending, because we do testing, we do all of that type of stuff. Our factory lead times are quite long. They're 5 to 6 months when we place an order to when the stock lands in Australia. So it kind of depends. Like lures are a bit better.
Yeah, lures you can be lucky, you can get it right early, or you can get it right after 3 years. So
Yeah.
a lot of it depends on right testing, bringing it to the right people's hands to actually get their feedback. Just going through the process and not trying to rush it. So sometimes it sucks because you'll have an idea and you'll want to get it to market.
Yeah.
Someone else comes up with something similar. So if you do release it, it kind of looks like a copy of it.
That's the dangers of it. But yeah, it changes depending on development. So testing is one of the big things that we want to make sure that we get it right. So cool. Well, the pizzas are here. If you want to get up and have a feed, and then if you have any questions, feel free to come and grab one of us, and we can go from there. So no issues at all. Thanks, John. All right. Cheers.
There's no reason customer, but I've just sold a Brazilian to. Just wants to have a quick chat to you about